Hey friends, and welcome to the Happy Hour with Jamie Ivey podcast. I'm your host, Jamie, and I'm so glad you're here. Each week on this show, I invite a friend to join me, and we chat about the big things in life, the little things in life, and everything in between. Hey y'all, welcome to the Happy Hour. What a fun show we have today. And I'll just say this, I get to interview a lot of people for my job. In fact, that's what I do mostly for my job. And I love it so very, very much. I have met some amazing people. And I will say there are some people that I interview that I just think, man, I think that if myself and Aaron and this person and their spouse got together, we would hang out. That's how I feel about this author who's on the show today. His name is Justin Earley. And I've never met his wife, Lauren. I've only met Justin twice on the internet through an interview. And I just think that we would get along with them so well. Justin was on a while ago. He is on episode 461, and we talked about his book, Habits of the Household. And I tell him this today in the interview, but you guys, the Habits of the Household, had I had this book when I was a young mom, it would have changed my life. I'm just saying that. It's for any age group, but if you were a young mom, highly recommend you get that book. But that's not the book we're talking about today. But go listen to that episode. The book we're talking about today is called Made for People: Why We Drift into Loneliness and How to Fight for a Life of Friendship. And I read this book before I interviewed Justin and just really appreciated the work he put in to helping us see as readers how important our friendships are. And Justin uses a term in this book called covenant friends, and I'll let him explain it in our interview, but it changes the way you think about friendships a lot. And so this book is for any of us. Like I tell him in the conversation that friendships in your 40s are way different than friendships in your 20s and 30s, and trying to figure that out matters, and we should figure it out. So you're going to love the conversation today. And I read this book. I would highly recommend it. So check it out, Made for People: Why We Drift into Loneliness and How to Fight for a Life of Friendship. Really, really, really good book that Justin released this past August. And then you guys, at the end of the show, we talk about music. I never talk about music because I'm not a music connoisseur. In fact, when I was on the Relevant podcast, that was one of my huge weaknesses that always came out, was when they started talking about relevant music, because I'm just not a relevant music person. I don't mean relevant, the podcast. I mean like up-to-date current music. It is just not my jam. Anyhow, I'm going to ACL this weekend, and so we chatted about music for a little bit, so I think you'll love that as well. You guys, thanks for being here. It is always an honor when you choose to listen to the Happy Hour, and I'm convinced that you're going to walk away from this show desiring friendship at a deeper level, and that is a good thing. God is for that, and He is in that. So here's my conversation with Justin about covenant friends. Justin, welcome back to the Happy Hour.
Jamie, I am so excited to be here again. I loved doing this last time with you.
I was just remembering our last conversation and how much fun it was. And if you're watching on YouTube, you can see the covers of your books. You have great book covers, by the way, Justin.
They've done a great job. I'm really proud of the people who worked on my book covers. Yes.
I think book covers are a really big deal. And you have, so last time you were on, you talked about Habits of the Household, which I remember reading this book. You can see I still have my little bookmarks in here.
Yeah,
and I thought to myself, this book is good for everybody. But Justin, had this book come into my life when I had young kids, oh my gosh, it would have changed my life. So I just want to say that. And now you're here. You have a new book out we're talking about called Made for People: Why We Drift into Loneliness and How to Fight for a Life of Friendship. So congrats on this book. I told you I was going to rave about it when we started recording. I read it this weekend and I loved it.
All right.
Congrats.
That's so great. You're like one of the first. You're like one of the first 20 probably to read it, which is cool.
Are you serious?
I mean, it's that new. I mean, people are, getting the early copies, and, obviously my editor and my wife and my close friends have read it, but you're like on the short list here. So that's cool.
I feel very honored. By the time this show comes out, it will have been out for a couple of weeks. And so I hope everyone has got a chance to get it. But let's dive in. Okay. You wrote a book. The last one that I know about was Habits of the Household, which practicing the story of God in everyday family rhythms. So good. Made for People. Why? Where did this come from in your life? I mean, I can guess, but where did this come from? We just went through a global pandemic, so maybe that has something to do with it.
Well, here's how I'd put it. It came from blessing and crisis. Both of my last two books actually came out of crisis. So I was like 2 for 2. Like The Common Rule came out of my crisis of my own anxiety collapse and realizing that I needed better habits to form me spiritually. Habits of the Household came out of a smaller but still real crisis of realizing I needed to apply this habit stuff on spiritual formation to my family.
Mm-hmm.
Made for people is different. I have, by the God's grace, since I can remember, um, in high school, been like blessed with a series of friends who have walked through life with me. And I would at any point look at my walk with God and say, I would not be the way that I am, following Jesus the way that I am without close friends by my side.
Mm.
And in that sense, I feel like there's just this great joy and blessing I wanted to share with the world. But on the other side, I'm looking out at a world in crisis. And this was the decision to write this book. I'm hearing more and more, as probably everybody is if you're paying attention, over the past 5-ish years about our epidemic of loneliness. And, I got I keep it on my table. Like there's the Surgeon General's report on how loneliness affects our health to the
Wow.
tune of, smoking and obesity, like a major health crisis. But Jamie, like when I look at my community's life, people in my church, people I went to college with, people who work beside me, I'm seeing everywhere that the difference between people who just sort of fall off and I say fall away from faith, or like really struggle with mental illness, or really wrestle in their marriages or disrupt a relationship with kids. Like life is hard for everyone, but the difference between those of us who persevere anyway and continue to walk with the Lord, and the difference between those who don't, I often see is just, do you have close friends walking through that
Wow.
hard thing with you? And
Wow.
that's called friendship. It's not magic, but it needs that term friendship needs to be re-enchanted, because I think we've lost how significant this relationship is spiritually, physically, mentally.
It's so good. Friendship, I want to dive into something you call covenant friends, but I want to just say this first. Justin, I am in a little bit different life stage than you, as in my kids are a little bit older. And so I have said often that one of the things that has been hardest for me to sustain at my age that I'm at now, I'm 45. My oldest child is 19.
Mhm.
So we're in the high school, college years, and I work full time.
Mhm.
The hardest thing for me to sustain has been friendship.
Mm.
And I would say that I'm also a person, and I think that you would say, you talk about this in the book, it's not a bad thing. I'm a person who needs like a few very, very close friends, and I have those close friends. Like
Yeah.
just last
Yeah.
week, I went to the pool with two of my friends and we caught up, and it's like we hadn't even been apart. I would call them covenant friends, what we're going to talk about in a minute.
Yeah.
But it's just interesting. You don't think about this in your 20s, about what friendship looks like in your 40s. And I just think it's harder than we could have imagined. Okay, I wanna talk to you about more than just friendship, though. I wanna talk to you about covenant friendship, which is what you talk about in your entire book, and I want you to define it for us. I'm gonna read something from here, and I don't wanna take away your definition, but I want you to expand on it. You say in the chapter on forgiveness, this is in your book, page 112, you say, "If you wanna pursue happiness, then stick with companions, people who
Mm.
like the same things you do, and make sure to leave them whenever things start to turn toward real friendship. But if you want to pursue holiness, and find covenant friends and stick around long enough to get hurt, forgive, and get hurt and forgive again. In the pursuit of happiness, you'll find neither happiness nor holiness. In this pursuit of holiness, you'll find both." That kind of pierced me into my little insides, that little thing just in there. But this whole journey that you take us through on this book, you talk about covenant friendship, and I want you to define that for us. What does that actually mean? Because that's a term that was new for me. The words I've heard separately, obviously,
Yes.
but putting them together was a new thing for me. So tell us about that.
I'm so glad you're diving into this. I wanted to call the book Covenant Friendship. The publisher would not let me. And I think they were right. I think Made for People has a better wide appeal. But I'm
I
trying to
agree
get
with them,
people,
even
to
though I love this term. Go for
yeah,
it.
yeah. But so I'm trying to get people's attention, saying you're made for people, and then focus you in on a re-enlivening of the meaning of friendship. And the way that I do that is by using the term covenant friendship. And what I mean is
Mm,
this: I define a covenant friend as somebody who knows you fully and sticks around and loves you anyway. So it's these two parts of vulnerability and commitment. And we could get into these in more detail if you want. But I'm getting that because I'm looking at the way that Jesus talked about salvation and his act of sacrifice to us that made us friends in John 15. And thinking about the gospel through the lens of friendship and saying Jesus is somebody who knows us thoroughly and yet sticks around and commits anyway. So he knows all
mm,
our sin, he knows all our brokenness, and yet his love is there and he's not leaving. And so you can have a lot of relationships. And there's a reason this book is not about community or networks or
Mm,
relationships more broadly, because not every friendship, or I'm sorry, not every relationship will be that deep and that vulnerable and that committed. And this is not
mhm,
marriage. This doesn't have to be for life, but the kinds of friends that are really knowing you fully and loving you anyway, the way Jesus does, I would call those covenant friendships. You can't do a lot. You can only do a few, but you need a couple. So,
mm,
as you're talking about, life changes. I only have a few friends now. I'm like, great. I think one of the most amazing things about this kind of relationship is you don't need a lot and you actually don't need a lot of time with
mhm,
them. I mean, you need essential things in life like sleep and work and eating. You have to do all the time every day. Well, friendship, which is also essential for your spirituality and your physicality, you really like 1 hour a week of real vulnerable conversation where you just talk about who you are, who your friends are, and how you're going to stick with each other anyway. 1 hour a week will change everything about your life. And I want people to see that, you need that. You can't just exist amongst people because the easiest thing to do is to be lonely in a crowd. So you need real relationships, and I call them covenant friendships.
I love it so much, and, I have, some relationships that are like that for me, and Justin, when you were talking about how Jesus, like, loves us and doesn't leave us, I got a little kind of almost a little emotional about that just to think about that reminder. That's like a foundational fact of, being a follower of Jesus and scripture and the gospel, and it
Mm,
just hit me in a way this morning, so that's so true. You talk about vulnerability, and that's one of your chapters in here. In fact, I wanna read what the contents of this book are because I think this is going to speak to a lot of people, and we won't get into more than like 2 of these: vulnerability, honesty, covenant, forgiveness, invitation, geography, time, communication, memory, and worship. And I want to go to the vulnerability part.
mhm.
You talk about the difference between sharing and vulnerability. And you say sharing is what we do to update people on our lives, but vulnerability is what we do to let people into our lives.
Mhm.
And that distinction in friendship, covenant friendship, I should say,
Yeah.
is massive, massive. Can you talk about why it's important to have people that see that true vulnerability that we let into our lives and not just share about our lives? Like, oh,
Yeah.
my kid's going to college
Right.
and, story starting to drive and school starting, that kind of stuff.
Yeah. So this I think fits into the biblical story of friendship, which yes, that's a thing. You can read the Bible, and I try to show this in the introduction as a story of friendship. And one of the first things that you see is that we were made for other people. So Adam is told in the garden, it's not good that you're alone, even though God is standing right there. And then God gives him
Mm.
Eve. And this is just a massive theological signal that you can be alone with God, and that's not enough to experience God the way you were made to.
Okay, stop right there because
Okay.
when I read that this weekend, I literally closed the book and thought to myself, if you would have been with me, I would have said, "Justin, say it again because I don't understand." You literally said, you just now and in the book, being alone with God is not enough for us.
It sounded blasphemous when I first wrote it. And
I thought that when I
yeah.
first read it, Justin.
So I checked this out with a lot of people that I trusted. Um and then actually, honestly, I went back and I was rereading some of Tim Keller's work on friendship, which long ago inspired me to think more deeply. And he uses these same categories. And I started to look at and I was like, oh, this is not new to me, but I do think it's a little bit undiscovered in our modern moment or not talked about enough. But it is theologically accurate to say that we can be lonely with God because God
Mm,
literally says it in Genesis. And there's a lot about this to marriage. There's a lot to community, but it is, suffice it to say, I think we are theologically on target when we say we can't experience God the way we're made to experience him until we experience him alongside others. It's just the
mm,
constant theme of the Bible that yes, God does relate to us absolutely personally. He will come to you in your loneliness, in your solitude, but he also won't leave you there. And usually the colloquial way of putting it is to grow alone spiritually is to grow weird spiritually. We need community to grow in, right? But So this whole question started with vulnerability. So I'm going to try to make sure we stay on target too.
Yeah.
You have this beautiful moment at the end of Genesis 2 where Adam and Eve are naked and unashamed, i.e., they're with God, they're with each other, nothing is hidden. This is the way we were meant to be, fully known, fully loved. The next chapter, I mean, this paradise lasts for a couple sentences in Genesis before, after the fall, we see the first two things that happen in the fall are fig leaves and bushes. We hide behind fig leaves from each other, and we hide behind bushes from God. So, one accurate way of understanding our fallen state is to say we are prone to hide, period. Our shame means that we want to cover up our true self, okay? And so when we talk about what does vulnerability actually mean, it means the idea of taking the fig leaf and say, I was not made for this. I was made to live without these in front of somebody else and to actually be known. And I see this all the time in my life. I could tell you, Jamie, like, oh, Lauren and I a couple years ago went through a rough patch. I'd call it sharing. Anybody can hear that. I can post that on social media and nobody cares. But to say, Lauren and I had this fight where things were thrown. Something was broken. We were worried about the kids waking up because we were shouting. That's like, ooh, that just got a little specific, right?
I got a little uncomfortable, Justin.
Got a little uncomfortable. I could say to you, I went through an anxiety phase in my early 30s. Or I could say to you, so for a long stretch of months as an early lawyer, when I was and still am a Christian, I couldn't go to sleep unless I took pills or drank something. And then that just got more real, right? And so I would call that first version that's sort of abstract sharing. That second version that's specific is vulnerability, because it actually puts me at risk. Like, that, oh, that's actually sin in his life. The Latin root of the word vulnerability means to be capable of being wounded, which is exactly what Jesus gave us. He made himself capable of being wounded. And when we do that, we emerge as real sinners without fig leaves. And that's what we need, because we can't be fully known. We can't be fully loved until we're fully known. And so that's why vulnerability is this first part of actually making yourself at risk and known.
It's so good. We talked about this a little bit before we started recording, and I was just telling you that I had been doing some stuff on Instagram, and I was telling you I have this big love-hate relationship with Instagram. And,
You're right.
I think that we live in a day and age where a lot of people feel like they have these friendships via the internet. And I have actually made friends that I've met on the internet, but there's also, I think there's this facade that people think that would be, or it could be, this covenant friendship that you're describing.
Yes.
And one of the things that you say in your book, I don't have it in front of me right now, but you said, like, don't waste your vulnerability online. You said something like that. Can we talk about that for a second?
Yeah, I think it's pretty simple, and it's just that, but it is really, really important right now. If I'm right in what I just said, and that vulnerability is like, risk and making yourself truly known, there's two real aspects to that. I mean, one's just the obvious, that on social media, you completely control what you're putting out there. So you could choose to share intimate details, and that's fine. But the response to that is what's really important. Like, I could write a memoir tell-all about myself and not talk to anybody about it. And that's not the full idea of relational vulnerability, because nobody's talking back to me, right? And when we are actually in real-time interactions, and I talk about this in the book, of actually the difference between technologically mediated interactions, which I would call snacks, and embodied interactions, which I would call the meals of relationships, i.e., don't live on snacks, live on meals. But when you have somebody on the other side of the room or the couch, reading their face like as you say this stuff, they feel you get nervous, they hear the tone in your voice. And by the way, you can't edit it. You can't say it 20 times over and pick your favorite way of saying it.
Yep.
That's when you're at risk of being known for who you actually are in the moment. And so I'm all for honesty online. That's great. I don't want people to think like that was actually true vulnerability they showed their followers. You need an embodied friend for vulnerability. We only have so much capacity to be, put ourselves at risk. That's why you need a couple people, not a million. So, don't waste that energy online. you need a friend to hear your vulnerability. Um, and that's a big difference.
It's so good, and I experience that all the time with social media, and I was telling you my love-hate. I love Instagram, like, I love the connection that it makes. I personally, and I've said this before, I see it as a marketing tool. Like,
Right,
I
right.
want people to listen to the happy hour. I want people to read my books. And so
Mhm.
how do I encourage people, online? Because I'm an encourager. It's, like, one of my gifts. I love to encourage people. I love to talk about Jesus. So all of these things kind of fit the pieces, but I often tell people is what I share on Instagram is what
Mhm.
I have decided to share, and it's what I've thought about sharing. And with your
Right.
example about you and Lauren fighting, Aaron and I've been publicly about 2020 and 2021 were the worst years of our marriage. They were terrible. They were
Hmm.
they were so terrible. I can share that, but what I haven't ever shared with publicly, except for my covenant friends, is the moments in the bedroom of the fighting that like the
Yeah, right,
details and the
right.
intimacy of it. Like that's not public like, for people to consume, but that's
No.
conversations I have with my friends in real life, and so
There
you're
you
so
go.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I actually this is worth pushing into a little bit because, we do want people to be real and honest, right? And I think you can do that online, as particularly as a public figure. You can tell
Mhm.
about the real stuff that's happening in your life and encourage
For
people
sure.
on that. Um, but we all know that it's the sign of relational unhealth, not health, that someone goes and tells just anyone everything about their life. Like that's always
Right.
like, whoa, 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 red flag, right?
This is
And
yes.
yeah. But how badly do we want our, pastors, public figures, authors that we're
Mhm.
following, reading, or watching? How badly do we want them to be people who are known by a couple people, right? Like
Mhm.
some of the worst moments of the past couple years of my life are watching people I once admired fall because of
Yeah.
secrets that they had kept.
Mhm.
And every time I've just been like, oh, that you would have had a friend who would have
Mm.
talked to you about that. Like, I don't care that you make mistakes. We're all gonna make mistakes. But
Yeah.
what you needed was a friend to walk with you through that, and apparently you felt either too famous or too big or it was
Mm.
too risky, and I'm like I tell people all the time, like, whether I'm talking in front of an audience of thousands or, like, a small church service, just whenever I talk about this stuff, I'm like, "Look, I'm just thrilled to talk to you as a person without secrets."
Mm.
Like, and I'll say it right now, like, you don't know my secrets, Jamie, and these
Mhm.
listeners
Yeah.
don't, and they shouldn't. It wouldn't be healthy. But Matt does, Steve does,
Mhm.
my wife Lauren does. There's a couple people who know it all, and I feel so much stronger going out to the world knowing that these couple covenant friends know me fully and
Mm.
love me anyway. That means I don't need to get everybody else's approval. I can accept that these friends love me like Jesus, and that sends me out into the world in strength. So I'm not looking for that
Gosh.
approval anymore.
So good, and I think that this practice of covenant friendship is what will save people from those. Well, that's a big
100%.
statement. I was gonna say it would save them from a public downfall, but I think that it is an aspect of
It's
it.
it's a huge guardrail. I mean, our capacity for sin is endless. So, I'm not gonna put out any idea like habits or friendship or any other liturgies of parenting that I write on. Like, I think they're all good ideas, but nothing's gonna save you except Jesus. I'm just trying to
Mhm,
say that covenant friendship is the way of, like, incarnating the gospel into your actual regular life. And
mhm,
I will say that, we're all gonna make big mistakes. The difference between a huge public implosion where you lose everybody's trust and your job and struggling with something healthily and repenting and moving out of it is whether or not you have friends to walk through that with you.
mm,
And that's what we need. Like, I want, if I never thought about this before, but like one prayer for this book would be that it creates a new generation of leaders that have friends instead of secrets.
mm.
That would be
It's
incredible.
it's so good, and I just wanna make sure everyone knows that, like, yes, Justin and I write books and stand on stages and talk to people, but, like, my friends that I'm doing this with, most of them don't do what we do. Some of them do. I've been, grateful to be able to have people that do the same job as
Mhm.
me. Most of them don't do what I do, and I'm telling you with the couple covenant friends, I mean, just recently, a friend texted me, and I called her after this. Obviously, it wasn't just a text conversation, but she's like, "I'm really feeling about making a bad choice." That is something that she could say to me.
Hmm.
And she went on. I'm not going to say what she was saying, but and we talked about it. But that's something that she could say to me because she knows that I really do love her the way that Jesus loves us. I'm not Jesus and I'm not perfect by any chance,
Yeah.
but no matter what she does or anything, I'm staying. Like I'm here for the long haul.
Yes.
And that's what you're talking about. Okay, I want to talk about one more chapter real quick.
Yes.
It's the honesty chapter. Justin, I could have talked about something from all of these chapters. I mean, really, guys,
Good.
I'm
Good.
telling you, this is a great book, and you guys need to pick it up. Okay, honesty. The chapter is the art of saying what you mean and the habits of rebuke and encouragement. And let me just tell you, the rebuke part, it makes me get squirmy because I don't like confrontation. And
Mm.
I think that what I don't like, confrontation, is different than rebuke. And I know that in my head, but sometimes it
Mhm.
feels the same, if that makes
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah.
But you talk about this a lot, and I'm going to read this real quick. Let me find it. You said, when practiced rightly, encouragement and rebuke have the twin power to push back the fallenness in our lives and build up the righteousness.
Mhm.
And I read that and I thought, this is the gospel. This is what Jesus does for us as
Yes.
well. So I want you to
Yeah.
talk about this act of honesty in relationships, that where you can have someone who encourages you and rebukes you, because rebuke feels like a scary word to people. Rebuke feels like we just got called to the principal's office, but you don't,
Yeah.
you that's not what you're talking about here. So talk to us about that.
Yeah, we need to see it as something that Jesus was really comfortable with, so we should
Mm-hmm.
be too. Which, by the way, all the chapters that you read, the book is based around what I call the arts and habits of friendship, and it's just one way of saying, what are the ways that Jesus acts towards us in relationship, and how can we
Mm-hmm.
reflect them back towards friends? And rebuke and encouragement are on the list. If you watch how Jesus interacts with the people in his life in the gospel, he's really quick to be blunt and say, "We got a problem here. Like, get behind me,
Mm-hmm.
Satan." You know, which is
Mm-hmm.
probably on the far end of bluntness. Like, it's probably as far as
Right.
you can go. I don't recommend saying that to your friends unless.
Right.
But on the other hand, he's constantly encouraging and he's calling people forward. And so let's just take that example with Peter. Actually, in the
Mm-hmm.
same narrative, he he just totally renovates Peter's life. I mean, think of it like a house. Like he tears down some of the bad stuff. He's not demolishing the house, but he's like
Mm-hmm.
knocking down this wall of like, get behind me, Satan. You don't understand what I have to do. And he's building him up and he's saying, on this rock, I'm going to build my church. So there's this idea that Jesus's honesty towards us is honest about the problems in our life and honest about the glories in our life, which is just a
Mm-hmm.
wonderful and accurate way of talking about any human being. Like you're fallen. And if your friends don't have some critiques of you, I would not call them friends. But if your
Mm.
friends can't see the hope of who you're becoming, those are also not friends. But the people who see both, those are good friends.
That's
I don't
really
want
good.
people to accept me as I am. I want people to call me forward into what I ought to be. I want people to love
Mm,
me, but not necessarily the present version of me because I know that version has some problems. And that's
mm,
just any other version of relationship can't really hold that tension, right? Because like if you don't have a north star named, named Jesus to point to, then you're just like you're in the world of opinions. Like I don't like the way you talk, or
mhm,
I don't like the way you phrase that, or you blah blah blah. But when you could say you need to become more like Christ, which means some things need to stop and something need to come out. That's a whole new world, and that's one of the great gifts that good friends have to offer.
that's so good. You say in here, becoming more like Jesus necessarily means becoming more like a friend. And I found that to be so encouraging as to really how do we look to Jesus as our example of friendship? He's our ultimate example of everything. And so you did that so well. Justin, one of the things I've only read two of your books, but one of the things you do well in both of them is you it's not a book full of practical ideas, but it has practical plus theology plus
Mhm.
hope and encouragement, all those things. You do that so very well. I can say as an author, you do that well. Let's talk about some practical ways to become a good friend because most of my listeners are women. And so I'm not saying you don't understand us, Justin, but I mean, we've got a lot. You have as many things going on as we do. I mean,
Yeah,
you're a lawyer, you have kids, you have
yeah,
a wife, you
yeah.
are a churchgoer, you live in community, all the things. And so we can't really say this is a male female thing, but a lot of our listeners, women, a lot of them are moms, a lot of them are trying to juggle a lot of things. And I think I would love to say that most of us have this deep desire for this. This is not
Right,
something
right.
we don't have.
That's right.
What are some practical ideas? And you do it so well in your book about all the things that you do, but what are some practical tips you can give us for really making times for those friendships in a world that we know is just fast paced? It is what it is.
Absolutely, absolutely. And you put it really well. Like none of us is like, oh, I don't want this.
Right.
Which I always say, like when we talk about this, it's common sense, but it's not common practice. And that is the major
Mm,
difference. Because I'd say all of us are sitting out here wishing we had deeper friendships. And yet all of us are drifting in the American current of being busier, wealthier people who used to have friends. And a
mm,
lot of that is like if you're in college, usually you're in a countercurrent where life is structured actually to push you into community. Not always, but lots of times. As soon as you get out, it changes, and it changes for the rest of your life. Like you're drifting down the American current of being people who used to have friends. And so I had two practical ways that I'd suggest just to work on this is one, think about the saving power of a schedule. And I say this as like an hour a week ish. It doesn't have to, it's not a law. It's not a rule. It's a rhythm. Okay. And I think having the rhythm of saying there's one key gathering a week. This could be an accountability group, a small group, what for me and my two best friends, Steve and Matt, it's sitting on each other's front porch and having a drink. This is not complicated or formal, but it's a regular rhythm of saying, hey, once a week, once every other week, we're going to get together and just talk and reel and update each other. It is difficult to underestimate how much this will completely change your life in a way that is disproportionate to anything else you just do for an hour a week.
mm.
Um, just telling the truth for an hour a week changes everything else you experience that week. It
It's so
recasts
good.
it in a different light of being known. And I would like to gently say to everybody, you have time for that. And I can say that because uh, I run my own business law firm. I work on books on the side. I've got four young boys between 6 and 4 and 11. I've got Lauren and obligations, all these things. Um, all I need to do is open my phone and pick my favorite app, Instagram or others, and just look at my use stats. And I'll be like,
Right.
there's the hour. Okay. And that's not to shame
Uh-huh.
anybody. That's just to say, if your objection inside is, I don't have time for that, that's not you talking. That's the enemy talking. You have time for
Mm.
friendship. But you do need to work to make it a rhythm. And you can do that. So that's my first suggestion. My second suggestion is smaller. We can go to it later. Yeah.
I want to say something about this real quick is I know that I know what I hear people feeling when you say that.
You tell me.
I
Yeah.
hear people saying, but I have kids, like how would I leave them? But I have a husband, how would I do that? But I have work, how would I do that? And
Okay, okay, okay.
I hear that and I feel that as well. Like I'm in this stage of life where I want to choose my kids because they're about to leave, all the things.
Mm,
But I want to say this. My husband, Aaron, um, is a better husband, dad, pastor, leader, all the things when he gets away
this.
to West Texas. Now, this is not the hour, but it's an example. When he gets away to West Texas
Yes,
for a couple of days, a couple of times a year. And I
yes.
remember early in our marriage when he brought this up, I was like, oh, so you need to get away. Okay, well, we have 4 children. I'm a stay-at-home mom, and you need to get away? This doesn't add up, Aaron Ivey. Like, that was my first thought was like, okay, well, me too.
Yes,
But then I've grown a lot of maturity, and I see the benefit to me. I see the benefit to
yes.
him. I see the benefit to our marriage, to our kids, to his leadership, all the things. And so I just want to say that sometimes it takes a conversation. And I would imagine that you and Lauren have had to figure out this rhythm.
100%.
You mentioned in your book that you want your kids to see you value friendship. And so I just want
Yes.
to tell you, I hear people going, but what about my spouse? What about my kids? What about my job? So tell me about that real quick. I just said how that's
Uh,
helped our
this
marriage,
is really
and that's
good,
a
Jamie.
getaway.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's really good. That's pushing me even more into the particulars, and they're there. For example, last night, I happily sent Lauren out of the house before kids' bedtimes, and I was like, "I'll
That's
do
the
it,
key right there, Justin. That's
I'll
the
clean
key
up
before.
I'll clean up from dinner, I'll put all the boys to bed." Why? Because Lauren had a book club with two of her favorite people. And when she came back that night, I was like, how was it? What'd you talk about? She's like, actually, we mostly just caught up. And I was like, yes, because I know book club with these two friends signals intentional conversation where she will be refreshed and nourished in life. I am happy to put the kids to bed, and my kids are, kind of need to wrestle them, smash them to bed, but because I know she's going to become back a happier woman, a happier wife.
Mhm.
Everything is better when she gets that hour of friendship. And by the way, we were literally just texting this morning about like, oh, hey, I'm going to try to hang out with Drew and Barrett on Sunday night. That'll be fine, right? Because blah, blah, blah. And she was like, oh, we got to pack for a trip the next day, but yeah, I'll handle that. And I'm just saying, our marriage at this point, and this is, we've worked towards it, is to see friendship as like a quiet time. I'm not saying it's exactly the same,
Mm.
but if
Right.
your spouse came to you and is like, "Hey, could I get an hour? I just really need to spend some time in the Word." My guess is you'd be like, "Yeah, I can help you with that." Even if you're like, "This is an
Mhm.
inconvenient time," but you're like, "I see what you're going for. Let me give you that." I
Mhm.
want to elevate friendship to say this: we're working spiritually here if we're doing it right. Now, I'm not just saying like I'm going to go shoot pool and drink beer with the guys, unless that's the
Mhm.
place where you also talk. If so, great.
Yeah.
We give that to each other, and lastly, I love having my friends to my front porch to do this because my boys can see it. And I want
Mhm.
them to see that I read the Bible. I want them to see that I sing in church. I want them to see that I have friends and that I talk honestly
Mm.
with them and that it's important to me. It's
Yeah.
a great
I thought
gift
that
to
was
pass
really
on.
good.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was really good. Okay, I hijacked your first one. What was your second practical tip for doing friendship in a fast-paced world?
Yeah. A second practical tip, and this might be already happening for most people, but I actually want to say lean into it unexpectedly, is your text chains or your email lists or your group chats. I actually think that I can talk a lot about how, technology is a snack. Don't live on it. Embodied
Mhm.
relationships are the meal. We all know what happens when we just eat snacks. We feel full, but we remain unnourished and we die. End of diatribe. However, I do think there's actually a really beautiful thing that can happen when you have a text chain with, a couple friends and you meaningfully ping around updates and funny memes and blah blah blah. But like when we have one couple of these where prayer requests and updates are intermixed. And we're in real time hearing, oh, so and so needs prayer today for this operation or that job loss or their mental illness they're struggling with. And it does keep us, it sustains us to that next meal. So then when we sit down
Mm.
in person, we can
Mhm.
say like, I've been praying for you. Tell me more
Mhm.
about what happened on Tuesday that sent you into that panic attack or something. And I would just want to be like, kind of give people permission to say those those text chains where you're sharing updates and prayer requests, and if you're not, start doing it and lean into
Mhm.
it because they can help you actually start to cultivate what needs to be cultivated in the meantime. So don't feel bad, feel good about
Mm.
that. Just don't let it overshadow embodied relationships.
I love that. I have a group that we call it's our confessional community, and we meet one so it's a little bit different than what you're talking about, but I would call these covenant friends for sure. We meet once a month on Zoom for 3
Mhm.
hours.
Yep. Yep.
We live all over the country. We meet once a year in person for a couple of
I
days,
love that.
and, our text what the reason I'm saying this because of our text thread, it is
Yes.
full of this exact thing. I mean, my phone was blowing up this morning with someone talking about something they're going through in that
Mm.
community,
Yes.
and it just allows us to stay connected in between those and we don't have the physical touch points, and I
Right.
have that here. I'm just talking about how I use the text message for that. Um, Justin, I love this book so much. I feel like people are going to read this book or people who are going, okay, I have some friends. I think I want more out of it.
Mhm.
Or even some people who are in my stage, as I already said, of going, I've lost that connection with people. Like
Mm.
and I love how you said in college, we're kind of geared towards that. And it's true. Like it kind
Yeah.
of pushes us into these dorm life and apartment life and all these things, and
Yeah.
then when you get out, it's like, "Hey, spread out and, do your own thing
Right. Right.
forever."
Right.
And so this Why We Drift into Loneliness and How to Fight for a Life of Friendship is so good. Justin, thanks for your work. I'm really proud of you.
Oh,
Great
thank
stuff.
you.
Yeah,
That
great
means more
stuff.
than you might know.
And I always love having you on the show, so it's really great. Okay, I wanna know 2 things from you. This is a random. I didn't even tell you this.
Let's go.
Are you a music guy? Like, do you love music and live music?
Yes, I am. I am actually a musician myself. I was pretty good at drums in college in a lot of bands, and I still play drums and guitar. So there's a lot of music in our house. Yeah.
I did not know that. Okay, so I just wanted to tell you that when this show comes out, the week before, I will have seen John Mayer. Have you ever seen
Fun.
John Mayer live?
Not live, no. But talk about an
Okay,
accomplished
me
musician.
neither. I'm super excited about that.
Yeah.
And then the weekend after this comes out is ACL. And ACL, you know what that is? Austin City Limits, the music festival here in
Yes.
Austin.
Yes.
I just need to say that this is something that I do for my husband and with him because music festivals are not my favorite thing in the world.
Really?
But I know I would rather
Why
go to
not?
like a Texas. It's just hot and crowded, but I love a Texas football game where it's really hot and
Okay,
crowded,
that's
you
funny.
know?
Yeah.
But, it'll be great. But I was gonna tell you, I just wanted to know out of these people, who would you wanna see? This is totally random, okay?
Oh, good. Okay.
We've got, uh, Shania Twain, which I'm super excited
It's
about.
pretty high
Nobody
on
in
the
my
list.
family is. Kendrick Lamar, Foo
Very high
Fighters,
on my list. Oh gosh, these are
okay?
great.
Foo Fighters, Mumford& and Sons. Wait, is this the lineup for this year? It says it on the internet.
I believe it. I mean, that's an incredible lineup, but wow.
This is too many, like, good okay, the 1975, are you familiar with them?
Actually, no. I was familiar
Okay,
with everybody else.
they're the rage right now. I'm not familiar with them either. I'm not familiar with hardly
Huh.
any of these people. Um, Alanis Morissette, this cannot be right. Alanis Morissette?
Well,
I just think I'm looking at, like, these people have been there before. No, I think it's right. No, it is right. I'm so excited now. Alanis
all right.
Morissette, I'll be excited about. Foo Fighters, Shania Twain, the 1975.
Wow.
These are the headliners. Another headliner, Kendrick Lamar, the Lumineers, Kali Uchis, I don't know who that is. Maggie Rogers, I don't know who that is either.
Maggie Rogers.
This
Maggie
Oh, you
Rogers
love
is
Maggie
awesome.
Rogers?
You will love her. She's one of my favorites. Yes.
Really? Okay, so I'm
Yes.
excited.
Go online right now and watch Pharrell, the artist Pharrell, listen to Maggie Rogers' college music project. It was called Alaska.
Okay.
It became her first hit song. He
Okay.
listens to it. She's in the classroom and you can see his face being like, oh my gosh, this girl's incredible. And I think that moment might have launched her career. She's incredible. But I'm going to say, Jamie, Kendrick Lamar would actually be the most exciting person for me on that list.
Okay.
I'm really into his earlier albums. I'm incredibly intrigued by the idea that he won a Pulitzer, I believe, for his album Damn.
Wow.
He is gritty,
Uh-huh.
obviously. He's
Uh-huh.
like into the real life details of the life he grew up in. However,
Yeah.
there's like a serious poetry and a commentary on life in his that I think some people can miss. And he just sounds awesome. So I'd actually go to Kendrick Lamar, but close on
Okay.
the
Well,
Mumford and Sons. I love their sound too, but Kendrick Lamar is deep waters.
Here's what I'm going to try to do because I went last year to ACL with my family. And again, I'd rather be at a football game. But the thing that I hated was my family was into all these artists and I didn't know any of them. So I haven't even told them this. This is going to be a little secret for them that happens. Is I'm committing for the next couple of months to learn these people and listen to their music so that when I show up, I
That's the
actually have
best.
some kind of idea of what's happening. Isn't that great?
That's the best. Go look at their recent set lists and listen through them. Then you know what's coming. Yeah, that's
I'm
my
doing
favorite
it
way
for
to
Aaron
go.
Ivey. That's what I'm doing. Because last year I made him sit through an entire George Strait. George Strait was there last year. I loved it. But my
He's
husband was
awesome.
like, what are we doing? He's so awesome, but it's not my
come
husband's
on.
style.
All these people are classic. See, I'm
He
a
can
very
appreciate it.
I'm a broad taste
Yeah.
musician. Shania
Yeah.
Twain, go for it. Kendrick Lamar, yep. Mumford and Sons,
I
I'm here
know.
for it.
Okay, I love it. I love it. Okay, thanks for talking to me about music for a second. That's my goal for the next couple of months is to listen to that. But I would love to close by asking you, what are you reading these days?
What am I reading these days? Let me think of my favorite answer to that. I am reading a lot of I'm starting to read a lot about the body and spirituality. I've been really
Okay.
interested on how our physicality, whether it's mental health, neuroscience, or just exercise, relates to how we perceive our spirituality. So I know that's a kind of abstract, but I'm into it. The most recent one is this book called David Taylor, A Body of Praise.
I was about to ask you if you read that.
Yeah, and I'm just into it. I've just started it.
It's good. I recommend it.
Another one, this one just came out. Curtis Chang's Anxiety Opportunity came out a couple months ago. So there's a lot here. This would be a whole nother conversation. But
I love that.
I'm getting into thinking about how our physical bodies are way more spiritual than we think.
David Taylor has been on the show twice now, and he talked about A Body of Praise on the show, and it's a really, really good interview. And that show was really, it made a lasting effect on me when he was here in studio recording that. But that book is really good as well. So
I need to go back and listen to that one then. That's great.
It's a good one. It's a good one. We talked about crossing ourselves.
Oh, fascinating.
I know we had a whole conversation about it. It was really, really great.
Fascinating.
Anyhow, Justin, thanks for coming on the Happy Hour.
Thanks, Jamie. This has been awesome as always. I hope I get to come back.
I know. We'll keep writing books, and you're always welcome. That's for sure. I love having conversations with you, and you're putting out great stuff. So thanks for coming on.
I'll keep it up.
Hey friends, I hope you love this conversation as much as I did. To make sure that you never miss any of the Happy Hour conversations, go ahead and hit the subscribe button below to make sure you're notified every time we release a new episode. And if you want more content today, click on those videos over there. I think you're going to like them just as much as you like the one today.